And Mr. Chair, you are live.
Thank you. A quorum being present, this meeting of the Annapolis Historic Preservation Commission shall come to order. This commission operates pursuant to the land use article of the annotated code of the state of Maryland. Local authority for the commission is derived from the municipal code of the city of Annapolis, chapter 11, section 56. The purpose of the HPC is to preserve and promote the preservation and appreciation of historic sites, structures, and districts. Requirements for serving on the commission are detailed in chapter 21, section 8.06. The HPC operates pursuant to the state of Maryland 1977 Open Meetings Act, and therefore no pending application shall be discussed between or amongst commissioners outside of the public hearing to determine the disposition of the application. So we'll start with roll call. Will Scott?
Present.
Bill Williams?
Present.
Kim Finch?
Present.
Leslie Xavier? Kim Golder?
Present.
And Brendan Greeley said he would be a few minutes late, and I'm Kevin Smith, the vice chair. We also have with us this evening John Tower, our chief of historic preservation, Chris Jakubiak, the head of planning and zoning, and Kim Consoli, our recorder, records our meetings and keeps us on track. So tonight we have a usually we start with announcements. So John, do you have any announcements you'd like to share with us as we start the meeting?
Nothing important, and nothing that can't wait until April 9th. Thanks,
John. Appreciate it. Then we can have approval of draft minutes is our next item on the agenda. So we have three meetings to approve. So February 13th.
Approval is written.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Well, it looks like we actually only have 3 people here from that meeting. So are we able to, I don't think we're able to approve it with just the 3 of us, are we?
What time? You said that you needed how many people from which meeting?
So February 13th,
February 13th.
Kim Golder were not at that meeting, so they can't approve the minutes for that meeting.
I believe you can take action,
Yeah.
Kevin, if there was a quorum to begin the meeting.
Okay.
And if
there's
we've had the
present.
opportunity to review the minutes, for which I have.
In the past we've had the people who were not at the meeting abstained from the voting. So, but I guess in that case, if there's the 3 of us, we're comfortable with that. So, all in favor of approving the February 13th minutes?
Aye.
Aye. So that was approved unanimously. So the next one is February 22nd. Kind of a motion to approve the minutes from February 22nd.
Motion to approve.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. And then March 12th.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right. So the next item on our typical agenda is violations or previous violations. John, do you have anything you want to bring up for this section, or should we defer that to the next meeting as well?
Well, just one more that I'm working through is the natural gas that is being stored on the outside of Federal House in the large container, and met with the fire marshal, Public Works, and the manager of the restaurant, Jeremy Black, and I hope that we will find a solution to his storage problem.
Great, John. That'd be great to get that resolved.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. The next item that on our agenda is the consent docket, and we do not have any items for that. So with that, we can move on to new business. And and I wanted to take a couple moments to set expectations. Very excited to have so many people attending the meeting tonight. It's a testament to the importance of this project that we'll be reviewing on the 144 Compromise Street, the resiliency, flood resiliency improvements for the city dock area. As part of this, just wanted to remind some people who perhaps don't attend these meetings as often. So since COVID, we've been meeting virtually. And as of a few months ago, we switched to meeting in person once a month. And on the second Tuesday is our standard public meeting. And then our administrative meeting on the fourth Thursday of the month. We've been meeting virtually. And we've been doing that for several months now, since we were able to return back to the city council chambers for our regular Tuesday meetings. We did receive quite a bit of public comment, and we'll be going through that. And we will have opportunity for those who are registered for comment to give that comment after the applicant is able to give their presentation. We will have some opportunity there's a chance that some of the comments will be consistent, and we support and we encourage you to acknowledge the parts that you support and have already been stated, that you don't have to restate everything. You can just say that you agree with previous comments that are in line with what you had. And we may have, we do ask that you keep your comments to a reasonable time limit of 3 minutes or so. So with that kind of opening, we do want to have the applicant, well, hold on, let me get all the people who want to testify to, and I'd like to administer an oath to all those who are testifying. So it is a tradition of the commission to administer the oath required in order to testify in mass. This includes all applicants, staff, consultants, professionals, and any member of the general public seeking to enter into the record their comments regarding any of the applications, which will be heard at this hearing. If you intend to testify, please rise and raise your right hand. So I'll give you a minute.
So would you like me to promote everyone in the attendee list to see them, or are you just going to assume that everyone's doing it?
I think we can promote them for this part to administer the oath.
Okay, I will let you know when everyone is in.
Thank you, Madeline.
Hey, Kevin,
Yeah, Bill.
that may be a question for law for future meetings, if it is required to bring everyone up on a virtual to do this, or if we can just get them to all say they're doing it.
Yeah, we can clarify that. I mean, we've been doing
Just
this
a
for
thought.
several years, right? But I don't think we've had as much interest in it as this one in a while.
Yeah, this is a crowd.
Hi, Brandon.
Hey guys, I'm so sorry I'm late.
Welcome,
Glad you're
Brandon.
here.
Wow, a lot of people here.
I still need a minute. This isn't everyone.
There's no picture of me, but
I don't know why the thing's not working up here.
Is
I have that.
Jamie already in potentially under a different account? Okay, Mr. Chair, I've sent the prompt to everyone. Not everyone has accepted it.
Okay. I mean, we're just do the best we can. All right. So again, if you intend to testify, please rise and raise your right hand. Do you affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimonies given and the statements you shall make are true to the best of your information, knowledge, and belief? Please respond by stating I do.
I do.
I do.
I do.
Thank you. Thank you, Madeline, for helping with the technology.
If we're about to go into the presentation, I can leave the presenters in and just switch the public testimony back to being in the attendee list, if that's all right with you.
Yes, that was the next step.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, Madeline, just let us know when they're promoted and I can invite them to start.
Okay, so they are all in right now. It's gonna take me a couple more minutes to move everyone back, but I can continue doing that while they start.
That works for me. All right, well, we're excited to hear the presentation from our for the flood resiliency project in the City Dock area.
Well, thank you very much. We're delighted to be here. Eileen Fogarty, project coordinator. And one thing, Madeline, right after the mayor has a couple of comments, we'll need to have the presentation up while we're speaking. So good evening. Thank you. Our presentation will be brief this evening. We want to share with the commission the water views that you've requested. And we have with us tonight, Bryce Turner, our project architect, James Sink, our landscape architect, Kim Dallinger, I apologize, from the nationally recognized preservation firm of Traceries, Devin Piper, the chief engineer for WSP. And as you can see, we have our public works director, Burr Vogel, with us, Matt Kelly from Public Works, and you've already talked with the city attorney and the planning director. With that, I'd like to turn this for a couple of brief comments to Mayor Buckley. I believe he's on. Is that correct?
Yes. So welcome everybody. So excited that there is so much excitement around this project. I firstly want to thank you for all the work that you're going to do to make history, to help design the city dock for the next 50 to 100 years, a resilient city dock. I want to thank all the people that worked for over 2 years on the City Dock Action Committee. I want to thank Ellen Moyer for starting this idea 4 mayors ago. This is not a new idea, but what is urgent now is flood protection. We are on track to be have some of the highest flooding since I've been in office, if not historic. There have been so many flooding days, our 3rd worst flooding day happening in the beginning of the year. We are here today to talk about flood protection and the park. The park is the flood protection. We are going to come forward with all the other amazing design things that will have to be reviewed by HPC. They will have to approve the waterfront welcome center, the fountain, the pavilions, all those things are going to come before you. But what is urgent and what we have to recognize is the flood protection has to start as soon as possible. And it has to be fitted in between boat shows. We have massive amounts of challenges squeezing this construction effort in between the boat show in the fall, in October, and then getting it back on track before the boat show opens next year. So thank you for your patience on this. Please understand the urgency of this. We are bringing to you something that is 70% designed. We will get the other piece designed well before the end of the year. And then recognize that our partner in this, the US Naval Academy, is just working on finishing a part of their resilience effort, the Farragut Wall. That represents less than 5% of their flood protection. We're talking about 70% of our flood protection that is needed for City Dock to keep the business district and the historic district dry. Please remember, it's not a case of if we are going to face another Isabel, it's a case of when we are going to face another Isabel. So thank you for moving this through. I want to thank John Tower for recommending that we do the work session in the last HPC meeting. We know that was the public meeting, and this is an online meeting. We have to understand we're just coming off of COVID. There are a lot of things that are still evolving, but clearly a lot of people are interested. We're making it happen with this medium, and I really look forward to tonight's presentation. Thank you, everybody.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you so much, Mayor Buckley. And Maddie, if you can put the presentation up, we will start to go through it. Let's go to the second page. As we discussed in our March 12th work session, this waterfront, and the picture I'm going to direct you to is the 1899 one, has evolved at critical times in the city's history. Going back to the 1700s when it was a port of entry with warehouses. And what's interesting is it's actually 1897 on the Sanborn maps that the waterfront was during the 1800s an urban industrial port. But by 1897, there were 3 oyster packing facilities, including one that was tied to the Black Union, which is amazing, as well as a lumber yard. By the 1900s, I think everyone on the commission knows that there were gas stations, oil tanks by the middle of the century. And of course, moving to the next slide, the past 60 plus years, we have seen this, a paved parking lot of asphalt, initially for tourists and customers. It is still used that way, but it also, today we realize, is a heat island. With the next slide, please, we ask the commission tonight to continue this tradition of evaluating, working with our community, and transforming this parking lot into what will be a resilient downtown. As the mayor mentioned, our partners, the Resiliency Authority and the Naval Academy, are all a part of stopping flooding in our downtown, from Gate Zero to Compromise Street. The other aspect, which we've talked a lot about, and you'll see some views for this, is really transforming this dreadful area on our waterfront to have blacktop and parking into an active park, a green park with a canopy for all ages, and one in which our rich and diverse history is shared, as well as enabling everyone in Annapolis to actually get their feet into or get onto the water. Next slide, please. We've talked a lot, and the mayor has talked about the fact that we need, this is the time for action. There have been many false starts. We have businesses that are still closed from the 3rd most significant flooding event in the city's history. And we are now at the point where we cannot continue to destroy our downtown businesses, the lifeblood of that area. Next slide, please. We've shared with the commission before, and I'd like to share with the public, This resiliency project and site plan meets and exceeds every city plan and standard. Next slide, please. In addition to that, when we look at how we got here, just this past year, 2023, these are just the public meetings, not with the public, but with the commissions, the Planning Commission, the HBC, the council, the City Dock Action Committee, culminating in the adoption by the Planning Commission on March 7th of the plan. And next slide, please. When you look at what has taken place, it has been 5 years, 2019 to 2024, with robust engagements, over 136 public sessions, hearings, 300 plus stakeholder meetings, and again, this past year, 80 plus meetings. This is why, next slide, please. I'm going to turn this slide to Chris Haley. This is why some of these incredible modifications and changes which create a more vital park have taken place with groups like Chris's legacy team. Chris?
Thank you so much, Eileen. What's so important about this, and why I'm so happy that people are here and so respectful of your time as well, is that the history, the legacy, the culture that reverberates around City Dock is one that is frankly threatened every time we have flooding. And within this project that the mayor and our whole committee and the federal government have joined in on to renovate, to reimagine, and to reinvigorate City Dock, both as a green area and as an active area for family engagement, as well as one that helps tourism. There's also this situation of the flooding, which is something that's quite frankly has been it's like that thing that sort of needles at you over and over again. If only that, if only for that. And certainly personally, when I see the gauge of the water is based on my uncle's monument, I mean, that's something that is a needle every single time there's a flood. So within this effort to be inclusive of our diverse humanity and the diverse persons who are Black, white, red, yellow, indigenous, Jewish, Greek, all the different communities that have contributed to City Dock in its industry, in its history, in its generosity, in its cultural diversity, we have the opportunity to also make this area preserved for not only our lifetime, but for the lifetime of our children and our children's children, in a way that they never have to ever talk again about the fact that I'm afraid about the flooding. I think they'll have to put bags here or bags there to keep the flooding from getting inside of their store. I can talk with just laughter about, I remember when they used to put a raft on my uncle's statue. That will just be in the past. It will be something that people will not believe that it happened, because it's something that won't happen anymore. And at the same time, within that whole expanse from Eagle Alley to Susan Campbell Park, we will see such beautiful examples of our history, of our legacy, and what we have within 2024 kept the steps going to make this City Dock area one that anyone can just walk freely and get glimpses of the Chesapeake seamen, of the history of African Americans, of the history of all persons who helped to create what we are today. And that's just something what these images are showing you, that will all be remembered and will be embedded within our City Dock plan.
Thank you, Chris. James?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Next slide, please. So with that vision, that picture that Chris paints, I want to share with everyone this rendered site plan, which shows the extents of the project, which is before you tonight. The project, starting on the bottom of the page, transforms the Donner parking lot into a park space. It follows around the edge of Eagle Alley, refreshing Alex Haley Plaza and the dinghy dock. That space there creates a new pedestrian promenade along the Dock Street parking lot area, an elevated promenade, which helps with integrating the flood barriers. continues along Eagle Alley to a new Dock Street Park, which is elevated. So really the park, like the mayor said, is part of that resiliency project, part of the flood barrier. There's a refreshed and renewed vision for Susan Campbell Park at the end of City Dock, where we've also located an opportunity for the placement of the UNESCO port marker labeled there on the plan. And the flood barrier terminates at Gate Zero at the U.S. Naval Academy's flood barrier project. And there's a new parklet planned for the end of Prince George Street, which we would be forthcoming in a future site plan for approval. So I'd like to go to the next page to share a little more detail on really what we refer to as Dock Street Park. It's broken up into a few different zones. Here in the foreground, you can see what we refer to as the active park. This is a place with tables and chairs for people to play chess and checkers. There's outdoor gaming tables like ping pong and foosball. We've designed this sort of playful seating element for children to be able to play and climb on while they wait with their parents and enjoy the sun and views of the water, and swings that also overlook Eagle Alley there in the bottom right. And the active park is one of these locations where you can see there's trees, there's furniture inside of it, but it's all designed to be flexible. So all of that furniture in the middle can be relocated during times of events. So it can be used for larger events. Views are opened up for a stage to be placed there. Proceeding up the steps to the raised lawn area, there's an expansive lawn for people to lounge, set up a picnic, play Frisbee, which is adjacent to a new interactive fountain, which is sunken slightly down into the ground to create seating around the edges for all sorts of people to view and enjoy the activity there in the fountain. We think that this is really one of those multi-generational moments, which we see at urban parks all over the country, where you have a place for people to bring their families. It's free activity down in the city. People can go there and enjoy watching the children having fun. You can bring all the members of the family. And this is adjacent to the stage there at the end of the elevated park. The stage actually faces two directions. It faces that interactive fountain and the large lawn area, and it also is open to the new Susan Campbell Park there at the end of City Dock. So you could imagine small concerts, small bands playing to both directions. You could set up an outdoor movie screen for viewing during the summer. And the final thing I'll point out on this slide is the conversion of the end of Dock Street to a pedestrian street. So you can see the line of bollards there along the bottom of the screen. There's removable bollards at the end of that pedestrian street, so emergency vehicles and service vehicles still have access to that space. But really it transforms what is now, this parking lot, which is dominated by cars. The only area to walk safely for pedestrians today is right along that skinny strip of the businesses and that brown boardwalk, which remains in this design on the right-hand side of the screen. Now you have a generous pedestrian street where you could see food trucks setting up during events. There could be tents and vendors setting up there. And there's really a comfortable walking space to move a lot of people, for people to enjoy this area of Annapolis now. Next slide, please. As we've been working through this design, through all the meetings that Eileen mentioned, we've really been referring back to these tenets, which were developed by the City Dock Action Committee. The Action Committee was composed of people from all different ages, all different backgrounds, and that feedback generated from that process has allowed us, we think, to create a design that's going to be a place for all Annapolitans as well as tourists visiting Annapolis. One of the ways it's going to be a place for all Annapolitans is the ways that we're incorporating the legacy of Annapolis and City Dock into the fabric of the design. We're obviously replacing these parking lots with an world-class urban park for all people to enjoy, improving access to the water. This is not just through the dinghy docks, preserving all the slips that are along City Dock, but making this a place for more people to see and be near the water. We think is a really important part of this project. And finally, as has been mentioned numerous times so far, and we'll continue to discuss in this meeting, we need to protect the downtown and its businesses from flooding as soon as possible and for long into the future with this project. Next slide, please. So one of the things we come before the Historic Preservation Commission to review are the materials that we're using in the park design. These are the predominant materials, the ones that we're using the most. And in most cases, they already exist on the site today, and we think tie well to the historic district there downtown. So for one, we have the brick paving, which we're using along the promenade, along the edges of the project, the edges between the park and the water. We're using the same Pine Hall brick, full range red, that's used throughout downtown. For a number of the walls, we're using masonry brick, a matching blend of Pine Hall brick for those walls. And then for these walls that are being used to build up the elevated park, which serves as a flood barrier, we've selected a light gray granite, which we think is in keeping with the materials that are already present downtown. You see a lot of granite in curbs and low walls in the historic district of Annapolis. We have lumber decking, which is already present there. We're planning to match that. And then finally, interior to the park, we've proposed a gray concrete unit paver, which has some modeling, kind of has a stone-like texture to it. We shared this physical sample at the last work session with the commission. Next slide, please. Another element to this this review are the furnishings, and along the edges of the park, we've really tried to keep with furnishings that are already present down there, or even look similar to those, whether that be litter receptacles, bike racks, the benches. These are the things that we want to be pretty nondescript, comfortable, useful for the people using them, but not really trying to steal the show or anything, really just kind of blend into the background. Interior to the park, we think there's some more opportunities to use even more functional furnishings, but still trying to use those materials which are appropriate for the historic district, like wood, metal if it's painted in tones which are not distracting, as well as cast in place concrete planters. The table tennis, the foosball are both concrete elements. Next slide, please. So what we've done is, one of the things in this historic district is really focusing on views of the water. It's important for people when they're downtown to be able to see the water, to see the downtown from the water, to see important landmarks from the water. So the exercise we went through to help share the impacts, and in a lot of cases, we think improvements that this project will have on those views is a comparison. So we have an existing condition and then a proposed condition view. This one is from just outside the marketplace, looking down Ego Alley. You can see there's a pretty open view of the water, Alex Haley statue there in the foreground. In the next slide, you can see the proposed condition. We have a slightly larger tree there, but branching is plenty high to be able to see underneath, and there's still views, really the same views towards towards the water that exists today. Next slide, please. So now we're standing in the middle of the current parking lot. Obviously, from a pedestrian level, when the parking lot has cars in it, there's really no relationship to the water from this location. It's not really a place people want to be or can be, but just to show you what it looks like today, and then ultimately what we think it could be in the future. Next slide. We're in the middle of Dock Street Park. We're in that Fountain Plaza, just off axis of the park. You can see that the pergola structure we've designed actually frames views quite nicely of Spa Creek and Eastport across the water. All the trees that we're planning and proposing for the park are shade trees, which are going to have high branching, especially when they're mature. So at a pedestrian level, you're seeing under those branches, and in the winter, there won't be leaves on the trees. Views are even opened up even more. So you have the shade when you want it during the summer to keep people cool, and in the winter, it's lets the sun through to kind of give some extra warmth when you're out there. Next slide, please. This is a view from the edge of the Donner parking lot, looking across Ego Alley towards the Harbor Master building and the parking lot beyond. You can see that there's parking off to the right. We have the boardwalk promenade along the edge of the bulkhead. In the next slide, you can see that there's a park there to the right. There's seating, swing seating to enjoy views of Ego Alley. And you can see the canopy there in Dock Street Park beyond. And the last thing I'd like to mention on this view is, you know, in a lot of places in downtown, you can't actually physically see the water from where you're standing. But what you do see is evidence of the water, whether that be the tops of boats or masts. So what we like to point out in this view is even beyond Susan Campbell Park, you know, these trees that we're proposing are not going to be so large as to obstruct views that exist today of those ships' masts that are out there beyond in the water. Next, please. So now moving to some views taken from the water. We went out on a boat to get some of these views from Spa Creek. We know how important these views are for people on the water, whether they're kayaking, whether, you know, even just historically knowing that they're approaching the port and kind of getting their bearings straight. And there's a few landmarks which we understand to be pretty important for these views, one of which is the Naval Academy Chapel Dome. So this is a view taken right after the St. Patrick's Day event. So there's a lot of tents set up there on Susan Campbell Park. In the next view, you'll see the proposed condition with next view, please. Yeah, this is showing trees that are about 10 to 15 years of growth, so nearing mature size. And you can see there the chapel dome is still clearly visible. And again, this is more or less a worst case scenario because you have leaves on the trees, which are not going to be there 4 or 5 months of the year during the winter. And another thing to understand is that being so close to the land, this is where trees and things are going to obstruct views the most. The further you are away from the land, the more visible and really less altered any of these views are going to be, as these structures sit well quite high above eye level on the water. Next slide. So now we're off to the right a little bit. That's Susan Campbell Park in the foreground, and you have a nice view of the State House. St. Anne's Church is sort of obscured by some of those tree branches in Susan Campbell Park, but you can kind of make it out there silhouetted in the background. Next slide, please. And you can see it's a similar condition in the proposed park. the State House sits well above the trees. There's a clear view and then a similar relationship with the church kind of behind those trees. And in the winter, you'll be able to see it pretty clearly, maybe a little bit obstructed during the months when there's leaves on the trees, but really no different than it is today. Next, please. So this is, we've moved our boat a little bit over to the right, tilted the view, or turned the view a little bit off center. You can see the landmarks there on the right-hand side of the view. Next, please. And again, the State House sits pretty high above everything. That's still going to be clearly visible, and the church steeple again visible through some of the canopy of the trees. Next slide, please. I think at this point I'll turn it over to Kim to talk about some of the relationship, the design with the historic district guidelines.
Thanks, James. I'm Kim DeLeader with EHG Traceries, and I do believe that the design executed by this great team conforms with the guidelines outlined by the City of Annapolis and its historic district. The city dock preserves the Annapolis urban form and enhances it with the removal of the infill of the parking lot and just the parking lot itself, which is almost what I would call a blight on that portion of the city. It preserves the streetscapes, especially Dock Street. They're repaving it and in brick, which is the appropriate material. And the design opens up view sheds within the park and around the park, and enhances the overall tree canopy. And I know that view sheds are a very important aspect of this project, but as James just outlined, the trees will not impact the greatest view sheds from the water or from the top of Main Street. If you go to the next slide. So for the landscaping and site design, as James outlined, all of the materials are conforming with the design guideline in that they're using brick and concrete and granite and stone. It's important always when you're inserting new design into a historic space that it reads as contemporary and doesn't read as historic. It's a delicate balance. So them taking the materials that are historically used throughout Annapolis, but having it read as contemporary is important in the design and having it fit within this historic place. The curb cuts are as minimal as possible, and the street furniture abides by the guidelines. I know that there's some new types of street furniture here, but this is a park and we want this park to be very successful. If the park isn't successful, then that could have an adverse effect on historic Annapolis. And so I think in matters of time, I'll pass it on to the next person. Which I believe is
That would be Derek.
Oh,
Next
Derek.
slide,
Okay,
please.
thank you, Eileen.
And if Derek's not
Next slide.
available, I'll pinch hit Eileen.
I think you may have to do that. His train was running late.
Okay.
I'm sorry, promoting him now.
Derek, you're up, if you can hear us.
Yeah, I think he knows. He's just being brought
All right.
forward. Hi, Derek. Your
Yes,
slide. Next slide, Maddie.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I apologize about
can.
that. So next slide. All right, so I'm Derek Piper with WSP. I'm the engineering design team project manager for City Dock. My apologies, I'm not on the screen. I'm just arriving on a very late train, and so the timing just did not work out for this. So this image, as Eileen mentioned, is from the recent third worst flooding event in Annapolis history. It occurred in January, and the primary rationale for this entire project is to enhance resiliency for City Dock. This project essentially involves redeveloping an existing waterfront parking lot into a world-class public park. Next slide. The approach to resiliency is a tiered approach involving lines of defense. We have proposed a series of permanent and deployable barriers of varying height integrated into the park, located behind the existing bulkhead, while allowing a waterfront promenade. James presented the promenade in some of those earlier photo exhibits. Next slide. This image presents the alignment of the proposed flood barrier system. The system will provide tidal flood protection to elevation 8, providing adequate protection for the predicted intermediate or high 2050 sea level with a 100-year storm, 100-year return period wind speed, and 100-year return period wave height. This specific site plan application involves implementation of a barrier system from Donner Park around and along Spa Creek and connecting to the U.S. Naval Academy. Future site plan submittal will be provided for the area of the proposed Maritime Welcome Center and the flood barrier system connection to the Naval Academy barrier wall. Finally, the city is advancing separate projects noted in blue along Compromise Street. Some locations will have permanent flood walls to elevation 8, generally around the pergola and stage. Other locations will have permanent barriers constructed to elevation 4.5 and integrated into proposed planters with automatic flip-up barriers attached to the top, provide protection again to elevation 8, and other locations will involve automatic float-up barriers that deploy as the floodwaters rise. The system also includes deployable barriers at very specific locations for technical reasons. We have minimized the use of the deployable barriers to ease the burden on city forces required to deploy the system in advance of major flood events. We are providing a level of detail that presents the current layout to provide for Historic Plan Commission input. We will be finalizing the design details associated with specific barrier types after resolving any outstanding issues with the City, Planning Commission, and this body. We are providing more details than normally provided at site plan submittal for a complicated infrastructure project. The final design and construction of this integrated flood barrier system is complex as the various barrier types and locations significantly impact the design of other project elements. The design build team continues to work collaboratively with the city and review agencies to finalize the design and generate construction documents.
Thanks so much, Derek. Next slide, Bryce Turner. Bryce, we can't hear you.
Sorry, thank you. Thanks to the commission and thank you for reviewing this information and working with us to get to this point. I continue to be honored and humbled to be a part of the design of this project. Rarely do design professionals get the opportunity to deliver what the people really want, which is converting a parking lot to a park. The images that are on the screen at the moment show a little bit of where we've been and where we are today. The image on the left was really the consensus plan that was developed with the action committee some time ago. It was not meant to be a fully developed site plan, nor did it have significant landscape architectural input. But it's really evolved over time, and it's become a much more sophisticated plan thanks to the help of Mahan Reichel and the input that we've received about different types of programming at the park, from activity and also places of respite with the green, the fountain, and a lot of other issues, and input from the boat show and a lot of other stakeholders. So it's super exciting, really. Elevating City Dock and making it green to deter rising seawater in a passive manner is a beautiful solution. And while we do require some additional barriers where circulation paths become more narrow, it really is an elegant solution that will protect our historic downtown. As James said, this will allow for much greater access for Annapolitans to access the water. And we think that's really important. We'll be able to incorporate a lot of the cultural legacy items that Chris spoke about. It is really critical that we get this project approved so that we can keep moving by completing the smaller scale engineering, order materials, mobilize, and really begin construction immediately following the boat show in October, as the mayor mentioned. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. We really do have found space here at City Dock that we're going to be putting to a much higher and better use. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And that concludes our presentation. Let's go to the last slide for remind everybody of what it is we're doing. And that concludes what we have to share with you this evening.
Thank you for the presentation tonight. The commissioners, do we have any clarifying questions we'd like to ask this time? Seems like most of our questions may have gotten answered a couple weeks ago, but if I would like to, well, I guess we'll go in order for the, if we don't have any clarifying questions, John, would you present your staff report for us?
So my staff report was, without question, most difficult to write. There are simply hundreds of pages of material of all varieties, the different committees, CDAC, different recommendations, the history of the space. It all needs to be recognized. But the most important thing to recognize right now is that on January 10th, we had a catastrophic flood. And it wasn't caused by what anyone would probably consider to be a major weather event. It was really a windstorm. Just a windstorm. And it was the third largest flooding that the city's ever experienced. So from that perspective, the resiliency is one of the primary focuses of my staff report, along with trees within the active park and the number of trees, the type of fixtures and furnishings, and for almost everything, I don't think that there is a final design. And I would say that's especially true for the resiliency. So in conclusion, for the staff report, I recommended conditional approval for almost every element of the park, except for the basic interior, the paving, the grass, and asked for additional and future presentations for the Maritime Welcome Center, the pergola, any changes to or clarifications of the resiliency features. And this is just an aside, really, considering the magnitude of what we're talking about. But I do believe that we're going to have to revisit our fixtures and furnishings for outdoor fixtures and furnishings. We may have to modify them for this project. That's something for the future. It's going to be quite some time before fixtures and furnishings are really needed for this park. But I think they need a lot of focus because most of them don't currently fit our guidelines. So I think that's another area. But with the conditions that I've recommended and the future work in developing particular aspects of this project, I think that it can be conditionally approved. And that's really what my recommendation is. But I would say there's still a lot of work to do.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate that. Your staff report was detailed and very helpful. So I appreciate the hard work that went into that.
Well, you're welcome. I would like to say though, as we get to the recommendations, I'd like to be able to remind everyone that we are still trying to maintain views here, and as much as we may want trees everywhere, we have to be sensitive to these views. Bryce showed the initial plan and then the proposed plan. The initial plan had a much wider and more open viewscape. So the new plan has many, many trees. And I think that the commission really needs to look at that and, possibly, if the commission agrees, consider moving some of the trees, especially within the active park, to the perimeter. So you have two axes of trees rather than a number of trees within the interior of the park. Let me also say, in terms of equivalencies, this project is immense. Looking at all of the details, looking at all the different designs, looking at the construction plans, we could have several meetings on the Donner Park alone. So I think that it's great that we're moving forward as we are. It's absolutely necessary, but there's still a lot to determine.
Thank you, John. I appreciate your comments on this project. Usually we ask who's done a site inspection, but I'm confident we've all been there. And we even just this week, the flood water made it to the front door of the businesses on Dock Street and covered the sidewalk. And I was in tennis shoes and I didn't even want to walk across it and get the flood water in my shoes. So that's of course the January one was even more devastating, but just it seems like every time we meet there was another flood in between our meetings. All right, so our next step is opening public testimony. In our guidelines, and we actually have our rules of procedure on a particularly large, when we have more testimony than usual, it actually recommends that we have the testimony in favor, those who are testifying in favor of the project go first. So if that's possible, if you are here for the public testimony, we're going to open the public testimony now. If you're here to testify in favor of the project, if you wouldn't mind using the raise hand feature on the Zoom so Madeline can know to promote you. And Madeline, we did have a request from our former Governor Glendeling to testify, and if we wouldn't mind promoting him first for that.
Will do. Mr. Glendening, you have to click accept on that prompt I'm sending to your screen, and then you'll be able to talk and turn your camera on. There we go.
Governor, you're still on mute.
All right, now we're all together.
Great.
Great. Thank you for your courtesy. I appreciate it. And thank you for giving the opportunity to submit a few comments. I will say, as a former president of Smart Growth America's Leadership Institute, and as a resident of downtown Annapolis during my time as governor of Maryland, I am very pleased to encourage you to vote yes on the proposed city dock site plan that is before the commission. This plan has been a long time in the making. Were a few false starts under previous administrations, but this one has both the momentum and the funding, and that is attributable in large part to the broad base of stakeholders who have been actively engaged throughout the 5-year process. The City Dock plan checks a lot of smart growth boxes, which is one of my main interests. As you mentioned, it is a project that has encouraged community and stakeholder collaboration. It enhances the walkability of downtown as a residential and commercial neighborhood. It upends a failed critical environmental maritime area policy, and it strengthens an already developed urban community. And it fosters a strong sense of place. I focus part of my comments tonight on placemaking, because that is one of the less discussed aspects of City Dock site plan. Placemaking aspires people to collectively reimagine and reinvent public places as a heart of the community, strengthening connections between people and the places they share connects people not only to the physical space, but also to each other. This is absolutely critical in today's world where we seem to be increasingly divided more than ever. Annapolis City Dock has been many things over the centuries. It is a port that brought goods and even human cargo to colonial and post-colonial America. As an aside, I must mention what an honor it was in 2021 to dedicate the Kente Alex Haley Memorial at the dock as a reminder of this part of our history. The dock was also a residential neighborhood. It has been an active commercial hub for seafood industry. It has been a site of large petroleum storage tanks. It has been a busy retail and dining destination, and it has been a parking lot and a park. Defining the place and supporting City Dock's ongoing evolution allows us to reconnect all of those pieces of our shared history and ensure that equity and inclusion are part of the storytelling. For the past 3 years, I've chaired 2 major state commissions on parks and forest. The emphasis has been on much more than just the beauty of the trees. We stress the health value of trees, including cleaner air, more outdoor exercise, reduction of the heat island effect, and most importantly, the dramatic impact that can have both the long-term reduction of climate change and the mitigation, and then the resiliency as we encounter the effects of this. In that context, what a pleasure it is to see the City Dock Park as part of this plan. A 1.5-acre park that replaces asphalt is part of the climate change storm resiliency strategy. There's an elevated promenade with walkways, bike paths, and trees. It includes a shaded green area, again, with trees. I do tell my Johns Hopkins class that I teach to business majors about resiliency, climate change, and equity, that this is how you do climate change, climate resiliency. It's a major step forward that will have, I think, long-term implications for the city, as well as put the city increasingly as a model for the country. Annapolis is a historic city, and people rightfully feel protective of how we manage public assets of the City Dock. At the time, I believe, is to protect this historic area for future generations is now. I thank you for the opportunity to be here with you this evening, and wish you well as you go through the next level of deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Now, can you promote the next speaker?
I sure can. I'm just going to go in order of who has their hands raised. So Sarah Aiken, you are up first.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Aiken, and I'm a direct descendant of Thomas Jennings, the second owner of the Peka House. He was also the first Attorney General of Maryland, as well as a past mayor of Annapolis and a judge for the Orphans Court. I am also the appointed ambassador of pickleball for the city of Annapolis, a game which did not exist in the late 1700s. So tonight I represent 300 years of continuity in the city of Annapolis. And I am speaking in support of the city park. And thank you, Mr. Glendenning, for being so articulate and making my speech easy this evening. So I am in support of the park, and moving forward in October of this year, I'm going to cut myself short because I know we have a lot of people to hear from. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate your comments, and appreciate you remembering the guidance too, that we don't need to repeat the same things that you're in favor of. You can just reiterate that you're in favor of them. So thank you.
Next on my list is Shelton Willett.
Shelton, you're on mute. Oh, there you go. Right.
Okay. Pardon me. I was on the way downtown now. Yes, I am in support of the park. I'm very excited to stop the flooding. It's been flooding since I've ever heard of Annapolis. There's been floods each year, and it's exciting to see someone making a move to get that taken care of. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Shelton. Appreciate it.
Next on my list is Eric Evans.
Good evening. My big concern is about the flooding that consistently happens downtown. So I just wanted to thank you guys for your presentation, but also kind of remind you that time is of the essence. The January flood did shut down businesses for more than a month. And this gives us the opportunity for flood mitigation and creating a inviting waterfront that would attract locals and visitors, which is important to our downtown Annapolis economic vitality. We've had years of public review and comments, and I look forward to seeing all parties moving this project forward as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Next on my list is Susie Smith.
Good evening, commissioners. I want to congratulate the city on moving decision-making forward to solve a threat to our historic downtown and create an enhancement for the residents and visitors to our city. For so many years, there was talk and hand-wringing. As climate change was more real, the city did more. 6 years ago, under the umbrella of the partnership between Historic Annapolis and the city, residents wanting different uses of City Dock and the downtown started the hard work with superior professional volunteers to make a recommendation that they all could get behind. This, of course, took time, but facilitator Eileen Fogarty carefully and patiently worked with the over 100 people to make sure all views were considered and debated. We are now at the final phase, you might say, bottom of the ninth on Orioles opening day. We are getting approvals of this. Commission and others. It is only the first step in the approvals, but I hope you will surprise everyone and let the city get to yes. You will be recognizing the work of so many fellow residents earlier in this process. Realize there has been enough time for questions, and put aside the banner saying this is moving too fast or the banner saying that this commission is too inexperienced and may break the law. It is not too fast. It has been a model process to be proud of, and that you can now join. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susie.
Next on my list is Janice Rotner.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Janice Rotner, and I am the daughter of Hiller Donner and the granddaughter of Joseph Donner. I am very much in favor of the plan, especially the Donner Park, as my father and grandfather would be thrilled that their parking lot is turning into something of beauty and a wonderful park, especially since their store was flooded with 5 feet of water in 2003 from Isabel. So my family came here in 1946. We have strong roots here, and I'm just very excited with the plan, and especially turning the Donner lot into the Donner Park. And I thank you all very much for this consideration.
Thank you, Janice. I appreciate your comments and appreciate your family's contribution to the downtown area.
Thank you.
Next on my list is Gina Henderson.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gina Henderson, and I am excited and honored that I have the opportunity to talk to you. So I have a PhD in climatology. I'm a professor at the Naval Academy, but I want to start off by saying these thoughts and views are my own and do not reflect that of the Naval Academy or the Navy. What I am speaking to you on is coming from a position of being a downtown Annapolis resident, living here for going on 15 years, with my husband, my 3.5-year-old son, and a small dog. And these plans, and the plan for the downtown park, and the vision for this area speaks to me as a resident, as a mother of a small child, as the owner of a small dog, and someone who literally daily, winter and summer, every evening after dinner, we go out walking and we enjoy the city. We have a smaller house downtown in the historic area. History is important to us. We battle that when we're dealing with maintenance of our downtown home, but we love it and we keep doing it. And we see friends with small kids migrate to the suburbs, and we're passionate about staying in the city. And what we're passionate about even more is staying here long term and having places like this, green space, open space, pedestrian space, community space, where we can interact with the town and we can interact with the water, because it's such a powerful part of what Annapolis is. The other thing I would say is that, again, this is our 15th year in Annapolis, which is quite a long time by some people's standards, and maybe shorter time by long-term standing some of the families that we've been hearing from tonight. However, all I can say is the urgency of this is now or yesterday. As we've said, the flooding is going to continue. It's going to continue more frequently. And this is a certainty from that I am comfortable saying as a climate scientist. And the last couple of big flooding events downtown, like the wind-driven event we just saw in January, the peak flooding, we were very lucky that it didn't occur with peak high tide. And that's happened twice now, that we have lucked out that those two things did not come together. So it's only a matter of time that maybe at a future event it will. So to me, as a resident and as someone who interacts with the city daily, as I walk out my front door, I really feel the urgency of getting started on this now. And so we can plan, we can be resilient going forward. And I really think that this plan is really for everyone. And I can't express how excited myself and my family are to have a vision like this for Annapolis. And I think it's going to be wonderful for the community in so many ways.
Thank you, Gina. As a fellow downtown resident raising a family, I echo many of your sentiments.
Next on my list is Joel Dunn.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Joel Dunn. I'm president and CEO of the Chesapeake Conservancy, where our mission is conserving the natural and cultural resources of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. for present and future generations. I also live just outside the city. The Conservancy's business is actually located on West Street, just a little bit outside of the downtown area there. We bought the old Maryland Municipal League building. But anyways, we are committed to restoring our lands through conservation practices that improve water quality, reduce nutrient pollution, but we're also champions of climate resilience, embracing nature-based solutions to navigate the challenges posed by a warming climate. And as you've talked about extensively on this commission meeting, Annapolis is ground zero for sea level rise. We saw it just recently with that 5.1 foot storm surge. And the East Coast in general is really leading in terms of sea level rise, with the unique challenge of both land subsidence and the accelerated rate of sea level rise. And just interestingly, since 1950, sea level in Annapolis has risen by 10 inches. We're facing an additional inch every 5 years. So the urgency to see progress towards improvements at City Dock is really palpable. Today's Historic Preservation Commission meeting on the City Dock plan and resiliency approach marks an important step towards a new climate resilient City Dock, and the improvements will vastly enhance the area's ability to absorb stormwater, and the expanded seawalls will block tidal floods. Raisable panels will prevent water intrusion during storm surges. So we've talked a lot about that. So I'll just jump ahead that I think these plans are the product of an in-depth consensus developed through lots of community input, and the vision of a waterfront with pedestrian access and green space, the Burtis House, and a maritime welcome center are really going to be wonderful for everyone in the community, including my two little daughters, who I look forward to bringing down there. The upgrades also feature the environmental site design, the latest and greatest, and the tree canopies, the cooling tree canopies, and just going to be wonderful. All that being said, I just wanted to say I'm really looking forward to this project, and I'm fully supportive of it. And I really think that it's going to benefit our city and make it a gateway to the Chesapeake Bay. I said this at the Planning District Commission in January, but in the spirit of Joni Mitchell, we'll unpave paradise and take out a parking lot. So I think the new City Dock provides a really wonderful opportunity for our community, and I urge you to support it. Thank you so much for considering my comments.
Thank you, Joel.
Next on my list is Karen Brown.
Hi, thank you, Commissioners. I am speaking on behalf of Historic Annapolis at 18 Pinckney Street. My oral testimony focuses on 4 main issues that are pertinent to the HPC. I largely echo the staff comments for conditional approval. First is resiliency. Resiliency is the driving force behind the City Dock project, and resiliency is key to the protection and preservation of Annapolis. We all know there is much at stake, as we've seen in recent flooding events, including this week. And Historic Annapolis is personally invested, as we have 2 properties in the project area and we want to see this project move forward. We fully support the imperative and growing sense of urgency to protect low-lying areas, and the future of our historic district depends upon a comprehensive and complete flood barrier protection plan. As presented, the flood barrier protection is still incomplete. The City Dock remains threatened without continued resiliency planning along Compromise Street. And I want to reiterate that future design must also go through the HPC and be subject to public review and input. Number 2, views to and from the water. The staff in their report outlined a number of applicable guidelines that relate to views. And we completely agree about keeping the view that this is what the community wants. This has come up time and time again in the past 10 years of community-based planning efforts, of which some of the existing planning team took part. It's hard to connect with the water when it's not visible, and the city should aggressively protect the view, one that has been in the past called, quote, the magic where the water and land meets, unquote. So this historic setting where Spa Creek feeds into the Chesapeake Bay establishes a unique sense of place and is central to the character of the district and to the telling of the story of its history. This view cannot be compromised. The proposed tree canopy is significant, but it does not appear to substantially compromise the interplay between the land and water. Still, we echo staff recommendations about modifying tree design placement, and in particular, 2 new slides from this evening, proposed condition I and K, should be revisited. In particular, the trees closest to the water's edge do appear to encroach upon the views of the domes and spires. Number 3, more HPC review is needed, and John touches on this in his staff report, that the phased approach leaves out many details: the pergola, the interactive fountain, the sidewalk furnishings. And future HPC review should be done with full opportunity for public comment. And in doing so, you need to take a hard look at visual clutter. And then finally, the city must be more transparent and accessible. I want to reiterate a comment that was stated from a member of the public, quote, "A project of this import screams for an in-person public session. This should be top of mind for future deliberations." Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, next I have Vince Leggett.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My name is Vince Leggett. I'm the president and founder of the Blacks of the Chesapeake Foundation, and I support the overall recommendations that we have before us. I really want to reach out to the work of the mayor, and I've worked with Governor Glendening, and I've worked with Mr. Chris Haley and so many others on the line. And I guess the point I would like to lift up to supplement my written testimony that is a part of the record is just looking at this whole park as being a place of learning and sharing and inspiration, reflection, healing, but also a symbol of hope and history that I identify from the days I've been in Annapolis, 40 years, and some people say, well, Vince, you're still a newcomer, and I asked for a bumper sticker. I'll proudly wear it, that I'm a 40-year-old Annapolitan and a new resident, but I'm not offended by that. But I remember Mr. Michael Johns, who was down in the little green and white boat laid up next to Donner's Park. I remember when Earl White was sitting on the Stanley Norman playing a 5-string guitar in a little ditty we call a jam session in the basement of a skipjack. I love mega yachts. I love cigarette boats and cigar boats, but I think both of them can coexist, where we can look at the rich history and heritage, but also look at emerging careers and opportunities. And so what I would just say in conclusion, I support the work. I stand ready to work hand in hand, heart in heart, with everyone that's pushing toward an amicable solution. Also, in closing, for me, I go to more funerals than baby showers. And so as we look at those griots and truth tellers and community leaders in our community, they're vanishing at a rate that's even quicker than the shoreline. And we need to find ways to capture those stories and those memories for future generations. So thank you for allowing me an opportunity to weigh into this important public matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince.
Okay, I'm going to keep going with the testimony. I will say the raising the hand so that everyone sort of did throw off the alphabetical order that I had. So I'm going to do my best to get everyone who did not raise their hand and just testify in order. And first on my list is Carl Snowden.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Will Scott, it's been a while, man.
Yeah. Good to see you, Carl.
I thought Vincent sort of summed it up well. Vincent, I am a native Annapolitan, lived in downtown Annapolis, and I want to echo one of the comments you made and really underscore it. This really is an opportunity for us to preserve history and at the same time make sure that Annapolitans have an opportunity to see Annapolis City Dock as their own. I lived on Pinckney Street and Cornhill Street, which was blocks from what is now known as the City Dock. I remember the City Dock very, very well. So I just want to take this opportunity to commend the staff, the mayor, and the commission or the committee that put together this proposed plan, and to underscore that the Caucus of African American Organizations, which I'm representing, which is a consortium of organizations made up of the NAACP, the United Black Clergy, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, local Black elected officials, as well as state, and just say that this is a project that will impact on us for literally generations to come. It is my hope, having served on the Annapolis City Council, know how government can function, that I will see this project completed in my lifetime. I would just urge this commission to move as expeditiously as possible to make this become a reality. And again, thank you all for your service. And I got to give you all credit. My recollection is, as members of this commission, you don't get paid. This meeting could go on a long time, Kimberly, as you pointed out early in the discussion. And so I don't want to be part of that, those persons that protract this meeting unnecessarily. But I do want to just take a moment to really commend all of you for the work that you do, and to recognize that this particular project is not for those of us who are alive today, but for generations yet unborn. So thank you again, and good evening.
Thank you, Carl. I appreciate your comments.
Next on my list is John Richards.
Good evening. My name is John Richards. I live at 120 Duke of Gloucester Street, and I look out my bedroom on Annapolis Harbor. And I certainly agree that effective flood protection is very important. In more than 40 years, I've been an Annapolis taxpayer. This is the first time I've ever felt it necessary for me to appear before this commission. But I'm disappointed that a meeting of this significance is not being conducted live in City Hall. The national COVID emergency ended almost a year ago, and there's no basis for hearings of this nature to be conducted entirely online. And I was frankly surprised to learn that here in Annapolis, the public is not routinely provided with all of the materials that you are provided with before you come to this meeting to deliberate and vote. In Alexandria, where I practice law, the applications, the staff reports, and all written comments are published online with the agenda and the draft minutes well in advance of the meeting. As additional public comments are received, they are posted to the docket for all to see. At least the published agenda for tonight's meeting contained a link to an application, but unfortunately that link did not include any of the elevations and graphics that have been shown to you, nor did it include the staff report. I see that sometime this morning, additional materials, including the very important staff report with its important qualifications, were posted on the city's Historic Preservation Division webpage. But I have to say, they're not very easy to find, and posting the morning of the hearing does not provide the public with an adequate opportunity to review and digest the materials before the hearing, especially this important staff report with its critical recommendations. And I could not find the written comments submitted by other members of the public anywhere. Many of our fellow citizens have a great amount of expertise to share, and their comments might well bring an important point to mind that had not been thought of by anyone before. Not sharing the comments which our fellow citizens have taken the time to submit is the antithesis of an open and transparent process with an opportunity for public comment that the law requires. I would therefore respectfully submit that you should continue your consideration of this application until, first, all of the materials that you have reviewed are published, and second, there is a properly noticed in-person hearing. I urge you to publish all the materials to be considered by you at a public hearing on this or any other matter. At very least, the materials should be provided by a link on your agenda. We, members of the public, have the right to help you make the best decisions for Annapolis, and I hope you'll consider this as you move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, John.
Next on my list is Sharon Kennedy.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Kennedy. I reside at 9 Randall Court, Annapolis, Maryland, 21401. I'd like to start my comments by saying thank you to John Tower for the best distillation of the project specifics I have seen in the last 3 years that I have been monitoring this project. Very well done. I would also like to reiterate from my written testimony, I believe the resiliency project proposed here is a necessity to save our historic downtown, and it should move forward. I simultaneously believe that the parks and all of their bells and whistles are not necessities, they are amenities. With that, I would like to direct the commissioner's attention to the following items for your deliberation. City Code 2156.050 Certificate of Approval for Demolition. This section of the code is that which requires an application for demolition of a structure to include the plans for a replacement structure. The city is requesting that the HPC approve the demolition of the existing Harbor Master building without providing replacement structure plans. The staff report presents no analysis referring to HPC Guideline D2, which you'll find on page 43, which guides your decisions related to demolition requests using 6 different criteria. The HPC should have in the record the analysis of the determination that the building is eligible for demolition. This application should be continued until the staff presents that analysis to the commission and to the public. If that analysis concludes that demolition is acceptable under D2, then the plans for the replacement building are required. Alternately, if you choose to issue a COA ahead of those approved replacement plans, that COA should explicitly exclude permission for demolition. Second item, HPC Rules of Procedure, Section 5.5 on page 6, state, the applicant has the burden of proof and shall provide sufficient evidence for the commission to conclude that the application is in compliance with the guidelines. I wrote these comments before I saw the testimony tonight, so I'm modifying them a bit. When I wrote them, the only viewshed analysis available to the public began on page 32 of the packet titled March 12th Presentation. Pages 41 and 42 illustrated that the existing and proposed views to the Capitol Dome. In the proposed view, the view of the dome was gone. In pages 43 to 44 of that same packet, the obliteration of the views to the St. Mary's steeple were clear. This presented to me as clear-cut evidence that the application does not comply with either A1 or A3, page 34 of the guidelines. However, in new testimony tonight, views I, J, and K were presented. Now, these may either exacerbate or mitigate the concerns raised of compliance with A1 or A3. But I do point out to you that the staff report states that this application is partially compliant in regards to guidelines A1 and A3. That means it is also partially not compliant. The staff recommendation to issue a certificate of approval based on the current application material with conditions for future modifications on landscaping is consistent neither with past practice of this commission nor with the existing rules of procedure of the HPC. And a final comment based on Mr. Richards' comments you just heard. I would strongly urge you to take a page from your sister commission, the planning team, who when presented with this complex project took the time to extend the record and offer the public the chance to come back for a look at this project twice. What they decided was they were taking on board an awful lot of information. They wanted time to think about it. They held the hearing open. They allowed additional public comment, and then they went into deliberations when they were fresh and ready and had time to digest it. I strongly urge you to follow their example, hold this hearing open, and resume your deliberations on April 9th in chambers in person. I thank you for your consideration, your patience, and I do indeed appreciate your service. I spent a lot of years in your shoes. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon, for your comments.
Okay, I have 5 names that clicked yes to give public testimony but are not here tonight. So other than those 5, that is everyone on my list.
Thank you, Madeline. If that's everyone that's logged in to give the testimony right now. I appreciate the comments from all of those who participated. It's important to have this opportunity to have the public comment, and it's a critical part of our opportunity as a commission to vote on this on behalf of the constituents of Annapolis. There was one more. There were quite a few, like Madeline said, there was a few folks who signed up to testify. I believe most of the written public testimony we heard. There was one more I did want to read into the record. So I'm getting that one ready to go. This is from Tim Leahy, former chair of the commission. He requested these be read into the record, so I can go ahead and do that right now. He said, I wholeheartedly support the flood protection aspects of the application. The overall massing and design of the flood barriers and the raising of the site does comply with HPC guidelines. Those aspects of the project could be approved at this meeting. But many other aspects of the application are not compliant with guidelines or are incomplete and should be removed from the application. The swings and play tables are not compliant with furniture and fixtures guidelines, referring to the clutter and appropriateness to the site, and should be pushed off to a future application. At that point, a discussion of how the park will be maintained in the winter will be important. The pergola structure has vague details and will conflict with guidelines regarding views to and from the water. The submission is incomplete. The landscape design, including the fountain, the game tables, does not interpret Annapolis waterfront maritime with any authenticity, and again should be pushed off to a separate application. While I understand the public desire for shade and tree canopy, the landscape design does not comply with at least a bit of view to the harbor from Main Street. The views presented to date confirm that the trees have an adverse impact on the view to the water and to the landmarks in town. Again, a redesign can be moved to a separate application. So the commission has a clear path. Approve the application with the conditions, removing the features defined above, and enable the flood mitigation efforts to move ahead. Then instruct the applicant to modify and clarify design of other features to comply with HPC guidelines at the next application, which can be submitted on a timeline which is not as urgent as the flood protection features. End quote. With that, fellow commissioners, were there any other of the public comments that you felt needed to be read in, or can we just enter them into the record and close public comment?
I would suggest entering them into the record and closing public comment.
I would second that.
Great. Let's then I can do that. As mentioned, I will enter all the public comments into the record, and we'll close public testimony. And then we'll move on to deliberations by the commission. So,
Quick clarifying question, please.
Of course.
John or the applicant's representatives could address this, I think, or maybe both should. Based on some of the public comments, I want to be clear, is the demolition of the Harbor Masters building part of what is included in this application this evening?
Yes.
Ms. Fogarty, you agree with that?
No, it is. It is included.
And what I would just add is that, and I think we had a good discussion of this during the pre-application meeting. The zoning code is very clear that a building can be demolished and replaced with a park. And in this case, the park, the design of the park is the replacement. And it's very, very clear in the zoning code. And so I think we discussed this previously, but that the city is in complete compliance.
Thank you for that. No, I want to hear if John has a rejoinder, because I do remember that discussion, but I was not clear on what the legal fine points were.
It's not a strong rejoinder. It's simply that Ms. Kennedy didn't read the entire section, and that is that a building can not be removed without a replacement unless it is being replaced with a park or other features. And in this case, we do have the park, and the Planning Commission acknowledged this previously. So it is an issue removing the building, and we don't actually have a building to replace it yet, but there are still many other aspects of this project that need to be reviewed to before the whole thing is complete. This is one installment. There are others coming.
That's the way I understood it, but you both have helped me feel comfortable that I do understand how we're proceeding on this point. Thanks.
Will, I think that's a good question. Will the demolition of the Harbor Master building be executed based on the approval from tonight? Eileen, you're shaking your head, yes?
Yes, it will. And again, to go back to the code, that the demolition of a building can move forward when it is either replaced with another building, which is not the case, or specifically with a park. The HPC has seen the park, is aware of the park. And so that is definitely very clear that that it will move forward and be demolished.
Thank you, Eileen. I'd like to just for the record then, because John, I don't know if you addressed this specifically in the staff report, but just to comment directly on the actual Harbor Master building, that it's a non-contributing building. It's a modern building and is not, therefore I would deem it feasible to demolish the building with this current plan in place. So I don't know if the other commissioners have opinions on that particular aspect of this. Go ahead, John.
Well, so this is really a guidelines issue, but it's also a city code. But you addressed in what you said the first point. And it says here, in its deliberations, the commission may consider the following: the significance of the resource affected, A, contributing versus non-contributing, B, primary versus secondary component, garage, shed, etc., C, age of resource, D, within or outside the period of significance of the district. I could answer these as I go along. Whether the resource is the only one or one of the last remaining examples of its kind, well, it certainly is that. It sits in the middle of City Dock. Whether the resource is a good example of design, materials, or workmanship, evidence that rehabilitation restoration is neither technically nor economically feasible due to the design materials, location, or other factors. 5, imminent collapse. I don't think I need to read that fully. And 6, feasibility of alternatives to demolition. So we know that the significance of the resource affected is non-contributing. We know that it's a secondary feature. We know that the age of the resource is approximately 50 years. We know that it is outside the period of significance of the district. And those are the first 4. Whether the resource is the only one of its kind, well, that is absolutely true. Is it a good example of design? I've always liked it, but we're replacing it with something else. And then evidence that rehabilitation, restoration is not technically or economically feasible. That's not the point of the park design. The park design is to remove it and replace it, open the view shed, open the space for public use. So I actually think that all of those are very easy to address. Now, whether or not the commission agrees with my assessment is up to the commission, but that is the way that I've looked at it.
Thank you, John. I appreciate you going through that. So I've already expressed my opinion. So about the fellow commissioners.
My opinion is that there is no problem with removal and that the city's complied with the requirements of the code. And for the record, since John voiced his opinion, I'll voice mine. I think it's an ugly building.
I wouldn't have gone there.
Well, I just wanted to lie. The mood was getting a little serious. I thought I had to throw that in.
There you go. I would add that I don't see an issue with it. I think we're well within our purview, and I agree with the staff report as it pertains to it, and I think we move forward.
Thanks, Kim. Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everybody. I just have a question. Is there any way we can just sort of put an asterisk somewhere in there that says we do expect to revisit this sometime after this approval? I mean, everybody's argument is compelling. It does not seem like it holds up this part of it, demolishing it, but there is some stuff in that building that's going to be necessary in the next iteration. So is there a way that we can just sort of put language in? I'm not sure what the work product is that we're producing right now. Sorry, John, you look like a man who has an
I was
answer.
just going to respond that I think you make a very good point, and the point possibly should be that it's removed. It's the condition of demolition could be approved with an application for replacement of facilities at a future date. And that's what we're looking at, hopefully, with the Maritime Welcome Center, although I'm not familiar with that design.
So we can make it clear that it is our expectation that it will be replaced without putting any conditions on what replaces it, so long as we sort of leave that bookmark in there.
Go ahead, Eileen.
Again, the code, the way the code is written, one option very clearly is that the replacement is the park. And so in that regard, it would not, it would, saying that it could be replaced with a building at a later time, that's not what's being presented. What's being presented is it's being replaced with a park.
Bill, do you have any thoughts?
I do, in that the building itself is unique. That's about the best that can be said for it. It does provide a service, though, to the community. It's the only spot for any tourist or community member or anything where there's facilities that are available, which kind of makes it significant in that manner, especially if someone has children. Not to mention the number of buses and all that come through. It is a stop. But to preserve the building itself, I see no reason it has to be preserved, but I do believe that there is a use there that needs to be maintained. Does that confuse issues?
No, I think that's actually it clarifies them. I think there's less concern about the building itself and replacing it than making sure that in a future iteration that there's a plan for facilities.
Yeah.
It's what the building offers and not the building itself.
Correct.
Yeah. And I think that from what we've heard that there will be, because there is going to be now, in what phase that building comes is a different question and a different answer, because we know there's different phases and iteration of this project. And within that, there will be additional buildings that would accommodate said need for restrooms and for children and things of that nature. It's just not within this iteration.
Yeah, and that's the gap between the two that are going to be the issue.
And
that
here's the
building,
thing, then you have to go to a restaurant, you have to be a patron. That's a place that we do have downtown, right? I can tell you of, I'm pretty certain based on the commissioners, other than Kevin and I, we're the only one that probably well, I don't know Brandon, he's kind of new, so I don't know where he falls in on this, but I know that when it comes to the younger children, we have those. And I can tell you, my kids started when we moved here, and I've never gone into that space and place. We've always gone to restaurants and things of that nature. And if I needed a space for them, then I used that. So I've never been into that building in the 22 years I've lived here. So I, it would be one thing if there was no other place, but there are. You just, you patronize a restaurant and then you have a place and space. So for me, I don't think that gap is as significant because of other places to go in the area for which I utilized for over 20 some odd years. So.
And for over 60 years that I've been here, I have used that building several times because I'm down here doing other things that don't take me into restaurants.
Well, I've been through two generations of children, a generation of a child and then grandchildren. So I'm very familiar with the building. I've used it many times myself, but I want to actually approach this from a slightly different point of view. I don't, unless somebody like John is going to enlighten me, know where it's the concern of the Historic Preservation Commission to be thinking about how many bathrooms there are and where they are.
Agreed.
We're being responsible public servants here in doing this, but I don't think that this should have any effect on our decision about this particular aspect.
Yep.
Additional reference of the guideline here, so that everyone knows, and we are addressing this, even though it's fairly cursory. D2, demolition. Demolition potentially alters the essential character and integrity of the historic district and shall be reviewed strictly. So
well, you'll have to go further, John, to convince me that this is integral to the historic district.
I'm saying that we need to recognize that it is being reviewed strictly.
Very good. I agree with that.
Brendan, go ahead.
Yeah, I can clarify because I brought it up. I just wanted to make a very limited intervention. I don't want to get stuck here. I agree. This is not really the time or place to be discussing bathrooms. I have 4 children is the answer. My question was just, we are putting ourselves in line to sign off on this building, and it's not just a bathroom, it's also harbor master's office, all these things going away. We understand that they're being replaced with a park. I think we're all on board with that. I also think that we know that there's going to be another public and potentially contentious discussion about sort of where those things go. And when I say facilities, I mean the dock master's office, all of these things. And I guess my question is one of clarification. Can we just put, like, in our approval, as we work towards an approval as quickly as possible, can we just put a line in there that says, understanding that this discussion is going to be moved back, so that I would hate to be put in a place where, you know, at the end of a different discussion about, you know, how we replace the dock master's office, that suddenly, you know, we approved it going away, so we're stuck with an outcome that I don't think any of us wants.
Yeah, Brendan, your concern is valid for sure. And the issue we run into is our jurisdiction, and what we are enabled to weigh in on. I think Will said it well, that we're trying to represent the constituents, and as residents, we probably don't need to take showers there, but I think the shower facilities are a key facility that visitors from the water take advantage of, and those offices. And I would say the presentation could have been made stronger by having some comments from the harbor master in support of this, of his or her facility being removed without a clear plan in place to replace it. Replace those facilities, even if the physical structure is not, as John mentioned, is not contributing. It's outside the period of significance, and therefore one that seems feasible to the commissioners to allow the demolition of the building, but we don't have an answer for where those services are going to be. And I think that would be appropriate to have guidance on that for the public who are very invested in this project.
Well, if I may say one thing, I think that building should have been gotten rid of years ago. But that's on a different vein. If I may continue, as far as the view shed's concerned, when the tent was down there for the Irish festival, parade, whatever, I noticed that it was about the same height as the trees that are currently down there. In walking down Main Street, I work towards the top of Main Street, I noticed that by the time you got to where Red Wine is, which is approximately halfway down the first block, you could no longer see the water. By the time you got down to the Fox's Den, you could no longer see the eastern shore. So when we start talking about something being put into the view shed, if the trees are dense enough, you've lost that connection on Main Street. Right now, you can walk all the way down to the foot of Main and still see between things out to the water and the eastern shore. At least when the Pride of Baltimore is not sitting there in the way. So that's the view shed right now. You can see all the way through. Heavy trees, that's going to cause some blockage.
Thank you, Bill. That's definitely something we need to address, is I think the trees and the view shed are definitely something we need to deliberate on. So, Will?
That goes the other way too. If I can't see Main Street, you and the water can't see me.
I agree with Bill that we need to be paying close attention to these view sheds. But in light of the complexity of what we're talking about and where our conversation has gone so far, I want to quickly, if I can, just summarize my position, Kevin, and then leave the floor to everybody else. I think we've adequately addressed demolition. One of the speakers raised, I think, essentially some very sound questions about the legal process and the openness of our deliberations. But as I always have, the Office of Law is involved in. I have two dogs that are trying to fight with one another. I apologize if you can hear them. Stop it. They actually stopped, at least for a moment. I'm taking the advice, as I always have, of the Office of Law. If the Office of Law says that we followed the legal process required by our code, then I think that this is an issue that we should move forward on and let the Office of Law or other appropriate agencies in the city government address that gentleman's concerns. I believe the applicant has met the burden of proof necessary. And my opinion is that if we don't have enough trees, people will not use this facility, and a lot of the effort that we are making will have been for naught. So I certainly am willing to look at how many trees and where they are, but I would vote for what was presented tonight. And I believe that Mr. Lay raised some good concerns too in his comments, but that John's staff report and his proposed conditions have actually addressed the ones of those issues that Tim raised that most concern me. So I would be ready to vote for approval of what's presented to us tonight. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Will. Kim, go ahead.
Yes, I would concur with that, with a more explicit caveat that we go with the conditions that were laid out in the staff report. I think that the staff report speaks to all of our concerns. Mine, I mentioned at the last meeting regarding the height of the trees and position of the trees. I mentioned that last meeting, and I still remain because of visibility. And I think that John did a great job of capturing that. And if we adopt what was recommended to us in the staff report, then we would have our concerns, Bill and Will and myself thus far, of the visibility concerns. I think that we would be in good shape, also realizing that the Planning Commission has also looked at some of the similar components and supported it. And that last month's meeting, I agree with you, Will, regarding our legal individuals who are on the line, but I would also bring to the attention to that gentleman's comment that our last meeting was in person. It was public. And so the notion that the virtual meeting is our only, and we haven't had one in public, would not be correct. In a virtual meeting, whether virtual or not, we're still entertaining public comment. And so in-person versus virtual is a splitting of hairs. It still qualifies as a public comment session.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate your comments. Brendan?
Oh, yeah, just a clarification. I agree with adopting, as far as the trees and the view shed goes, I agree with what has been said so far, and also with Kim's point that it's already represented in the staff report. If we do that and say, yes, we adopt what the staff report has to say on that, what action does that trigger? Does that then go back to Eileen's team to sort of take another look at the trees in the view shed and come back with another plan? What happens when we say, yes, we adopt the with reservations conclusion of the staff report?
John, do you want to take that one?
It's a really good question. So there isn't an alternate design. And so it would require a presentation of an alternative if the condition were accepted. So that's part of the process of creating conditions, that they are presented to the applicant, and then the applicant has to agree to their acceptance. So this is not the first time that the comment has been made. It goes back for months, but the design hasn't changed. Now, I want to focus primarily on what the staff report says, which is that the staff report is recommending 2 axes of trees. And as opposed to having an infill in the center of the active park, which is the park closest to Craig Street, and then also some large potted trees leading into the Dock Street Park, which is the green space that then connects with the interactive fountain. I was not recommending the removal of all of those trees. I also want to say that
John, was that just in the report, but it wasn't in the conclusions at the end when you're?
Well, it is definitely in the report, and
Sure.
Let me see if I have it at A2 and A3.
I just want to make sure.
Partial consistency with A2 and A3, and yes, I think that we should add it. The other thing that I want to say is the trees that are along the pedestrian promenade are useful and have much less impact on views to and from the water. And I think that that's an important point. And so in the plan, I think the plan is looking for balance between the two sides. So the side that is closest to the businesses has the same number of trees as the side that's closest to the water. So does it have to be symmetrical? Is there a possibility of widening the space between the trees, as with the first design that Bryce showed from 10 years ago, that started with large trees, but they were spaced further apart? Let me also say this, though, and here's the other side. The code requires that the trees be spaced 15 feet apart. So that is actual code. At any point where there is a public way that terminates at the water. So that's code. So I'm not entirely sure if this meets code. Not entirely sure, but my recommendation is that at least those trees within the middle of the active park and leading up to the Donner Park be considered for removal.
Eileen, do you have a comment on the tree spacing?
I do. We have our landscape architect and tree expert, I think, is in disagreement. If I could ask James and Bryce to make a couple quick comments, because I think they have a different perspective. Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course. We want to hear more about the trees.
James and Bryce, will you both join us? And James, why don't I start with you, and then Bryce can come in right after you've made your comments.
Sure, thank you. So I'll just say that throughout the park, there's no trees less than 15 feet spacing. So it's all closer to 18 or 30, even 45 feet apart.
So James, does that include the potted plants?
It does. Yep.
Yeah, 15 feet's not very far, so it doesn't seem like...
It doesn't. It didn't look like that, but I didn't measure them.
I mean, do you have the detailed landscape plans available, James, to show, and kind of perhaps we can take a closer look at the plans as we're deliberating on this?
We could do that. I would need to take a minute to pull them up.
I went through there's a couple hundred pages of it, so I realize it'll take a minute.
And Bryce, if you want to speak while James is pulling up that plan.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, especially about the plan from 5-6 years ago, the trees shown there were more symbolic, and it was a volunteer effort, and those were created really just symbolically locating an edge of landscaping. So it was a bit different, and quite frankly, certainly they definitely weren't 15 feet from one another. But that was the whole point of that, and that I tried to point out then, was that was not a site plan. It needed to be properly designed, by a professional. And fortunately, we finally had Mahan Reichel be able to do that.
Thank you, Brett. James, are you able to present? Or do you need Madeline to
Still, I will, but I'm not there yet.
Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's exceptional, since this is a sticking point. I think it is exceptionally necessary for us to see that what you are actually proposing, and that if we were to agree, that we know exactly what we're agreeing on, and that we ensure that it is in the record, and it will be in the record that way, and not just you mentioned some years ago that wasn't a true design of what was. It was just a visual one. Like if you're going to look at a new home and they have these trees that are just drawn in and put in place for an aesthetic, but not what's realistic. Well, for this form and this situation, we need what will concretely and actually be. And so if you have that, and if that's in the record, that would be very beneficial, because it is a sticking point. We just don't want to make sure that we say yes, and then, as John mentioned, yes, we can say yes with contingencies, but unless you all agree to them, then the contingencies don't have the same weight.
That's right, Kim. Yeah, definitely, whatever we approve would need to be the conditions would need to be agreed to by the applicant.
Yes.
Brendan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, no, I just emphatically agree with what Kim said. And I'm wondering if there's a way that if we're asking for this, a sort of a more specific proposal for what the trees are going to look like, can we give them meaningful guidance of sort of what it is that we're worried about? It seems like the two things that have come up so far are, one, they don't have to be symmetrical. And they don't have to be symmetrical because it seems like what we're all concerned about the most is the view shed from the foot of Main Street. Will it be possible to see out of Ego Alley and into the harbor in the summer? And I don't want to speak for anyone else. I think for myself, yeah, that view is blocked right now by a lot of things. But if we're going to improve it, I think it's also possible that we could, I don't know that we need to recreate everything that's currently blocked. But I don't want to speak for the committee. Is there a way that we can agree on sort of meaningful feedback if we say we'd like to see it? What is the thing that we'd like to see that's different from the sketches that we're currently looking at? How do we characterize that?
Yeah, Brendan, that's a good clarification.
I will, if I may, Kevin, I'll just address Brendan from my point of view, because as he said, he's not speaking for all of us. Because I think it is a critical issue and so many people are concerned about it, I would like to see the view sheds opened up a little more, but I would vote for what's on the table in front of us currently. I think providing that shade, that protection from the sun is more important than arguing about whether a view shed will be present 9 months of the year, 6 months of the year, whether it'll be exactly like it is today or whether it might be more constricted. That's my point of view.
Thank you, Will. Kim Finch, do you have any comments or thoughts on this?
Well, I thought that the landscaping proposed didn't really 15 feet apart for trees is not very much, and the trees kept being referred to as tall and large. That's not a spacing for a tall or a large tree. So I
we don't have any. Yeah, we don't have anything 15 feet spacing.
Okay, well, I guess that's not what I was just hearing right now, but it could be. So you're telling us the spacing is broader than that, and these are major, I mean, tall and large are not good landscape architectural definitions. Are they major trees, or are they what size trees are we really talking about? I mean, I just think it's an iffy place to put trees, and I don't think they're going to really thrive because the conditions are harsh.
Thanks, Kim. I think James, are you ready to kind of show us the detail
Sure.
page? I think that'd be very helpful right now for the commissioners and for the public.
Yeah, so what I'm presenting on my screen right now is the site plan submission, which I believe you all have received. This has really the details of the proposal. It's the complete plan. What we've presented at any of these meetings is not walking through black and white line drawings, but trying to give, a more broad view of what's being proposed, understanding that this is available to be reviewed in detail as needed. I think this is one of the areas John was talking about with the trees in movable pots. What's in red is just scaling off of this plan, which is at a 1 inch equals 10 feet, and showing that, on this horizontal spacing, they're 20 feet on center. And then this vertical spacing is greater than that, closer to a little more than 23 feet. It's the same spacing for the trees on the north side. And then there's a space in the middle between those trees. All that being said, these trees are never going to get very large because they're in those small pots. The trees that will get larger, like those along the promenade, have a
James,
much greater spacing.
Can you remind us what the elevation of the active park will be that those trees are sitting on?
It's at elevation 4.5.
Thank you.
Is that taken from sea level or where?
Yes, from sea level.
Rising. Okay.
So can I ask?
So for instance, these other shade trees, not that it's the same spacing everywhere. And these are like 30 feet on center.
What is the current elevation of the park that's out there? Do we know?
It's
It
approximately.
varies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it goes
varies
up and down
from
throughout, but
2 to 4.
if we can pick a spot.
Between 2 and 4.
2 and 4?
That sounds about right, because I saw cars driving through the floodwaters this week.
Yeah, but I would consider the Campbell Park at the very end.
The
That's
Campbell
at
Park,
3.
yeah,
That's at
the
3?
Campbell Park will be low, right? It's not being raised. It is outside the flood protection.
No, well, I'm just trying to get a relationship between what I'm seeing, because earlier I saw 6 in here and a few other elevation heights.
James, is it fair to say that there are no trees up at elevation 6, or do we have any starting at elevation 6.5 where they're planted?
There are trees up at that.
Yeah. Okay. I
elevation.
guess
Yeah.
to the sides of the trellis there, those
But
are the upper.
to be fair, elevation 6 is not that high.
Yeah.
So James, could you clarify how tall will the trees within the planters heading toward the Dock Street Park be? And I don't know when they're planted or as mature trees.
I'll just go to an overall plan for us. It's not here in this one. You're asking about these, like these
No,
trees
actually the ones
along-
in from the active park going into Dock Street Park, where you walk up the 5 steps, is it? There.
Here?
Yes, those.
Yeah, at mature size, they'll probably be 40 to 50 feet tall, fully grown. When they're planted, they'll be 20 to 25 feet tall.
So really the question is how with the lower ones on the active park and the taller ones in the planters on the steps going to the Dock Street Park, how do they affect the view shed? And my take on that was that it created a screen between the two of them.
So John, are you suggesting that the taller trees could be trimmed to create view shed underneath them, but the smaller trees will impede that potential view shed?
That was my impression, and I'm extrapolating to a degree, but I think you have a taller tree at a higher elevation, and you have a smaller tree at a lower elevation, and they're in line. You have 4 trees that are essentially in line, and that just looks like a screen to me.
Well, if you
I think
add
it
to
would
that
work as
from
a
Main
screen.
Street, you're going to be looking through there at an angle. They're now overlapping each other.
Yeah. And that
Yeah,
was my
the-
concern when I'd asked, and I was told, last meeting, 40 to 50. It seems like those trees should be switched out and be the lower tree. And then that way, if everything is 15, 20 feet, it just takes away this whole concern. But 40 to 50 feet at a mature, and when planted already 20, that's a significant impact to visibility.
So our professional recommendation would be to use these large shade trees. They are the ones that are going to provide the environmental benefit, provide shade for people to sit underneath, and also allow views under them. If you plant trees like ornamental trees that max out at 15 to 20 feet, their branches are low to the ground such that they block the pedestrian views. So it's sort of like the views that we're talking about are, there's different views, talking about views inside the park, out towards the water, views from the water back towards the city, views from Main Street towards the water. And the trees of different types have different impacts on those views. And the only solution to not obstructing any views at the park would be no trees. There's not a single type of tree or placement of tree that's not going to have any impact on the views, just like the trees that are out there today. The small trees in the parking lot block pedestrian views when you're in the parking lot of the water. The trees at the end of Susan Campbell block your view of the water when you're looking on Access with Susan Campbell. So I don't know that there's a solution in terms of this type of tree that type of tree that would solve the issue wholesale.
If I could just, I apologize, if I could just add to what James just said, there was a very, very strong expectation from the environmental community, from the concept that we've got a heat island. Our direction to Mahan Reichel was to provide the landscaping, the trees, and the shade to address this. And what they looked at was the fact that we're going from a parking lot with cars up to an elevated space, which in general provides better views if you assume the parking lot is full of cars. And that was the direction that they decided on the specific trees.
But that's also assuming you're not standing on Main Street where the main view is all the way down, or looking up Main Street to St. Anne's.
Kevin, if I may suggest, I think we're looking at this from a skewed perspective. Most of you were not on this commission, except for Kim, I believe, when this came up, but we had a lot of discussion, a lot of review of a proposed shoreline project at the Carroll House. And to the surprise of some of you, I was adamantly opposed to changes in the shoreline, but for one specific reason. It was the shoreline that Carroll created, and it still existed. We could all still appreciate what the city was like and how he created his little part of the city. What we're talking about today, William Pega didn't see it. Samuel Chase didn't see it. We're talking about what we know the city to be. and it was created by the intervening generations. What is being proposed, I think, is an improvement and a benefit, a greater benefit than what is there today. And I don't have any hesitation to endorse those changes that will benefit the public now and in the future. And I don't think that we should be so adherent to the idea that there's some view shed that has particular value unless you can lead it all the way back to being something that the original creators of Annapolis laid out and experienced themselves.
Well, Will, that would be the view shed of Main Street.
No, it wouldn't be, because those buildings were not there when Main Street was laid out and it began. It has changed constantly over the last 2 centuries.
But the street's been there for what, 200, 300 years with buildings. When was St. Anne's built?
St. Anne's is not part of this particular discussion because we're not talking about a view shed from St. Anne's.
But there is a view shed from St. Anne's.
Yeah, that's what Bill's saying.
That view shed.
Of course we are,
concern.
Will. Of course
Yep.
we are, Will, talking about a view shed down Main Street, which includes St. Anne's.
Yeah.
When St. Anne's was built, there was virtually nothing between it and the water. Should we tear down what's there so that it be restored to the view shed that was there when St. Anne's, the current St. Anne's, was constructed?
Well, where do we draw the line?
Where we wish
draw
to
the line
draw the
historically.
line. Where we have the discretion, we draw the line where we think is in the best interest of our community now and in the future.
Well, I think you've made some good points, and I think we've got some other commissioners who would like to chime in as well. So, Kim, can you, Kim Finch, can you have your hand up still? Would you like to make some more comments after what the applicant has shown us about some more detail on the landscaping plan?
Basically, I mean, I think these views are important, and I mean, I think I'm a big fan of parks, but I do think that we have to carefully frame the views, and I think what's as spoken to in our guidelines, the view sheds in Annapolis and the view sheds of the water are one of the historic elements that we really want to protect and retain, because so many of the residents benefit from them. So I think that saying, setting aside these major view sheds that are identified in our design guidelines and just saying they've changed over time, they have, but many things have been retained, and our position as historic preservation is to continue to maintain these significant views according to the guidelines that we have in place at this point.
Thank you, Kim. Brendan, do you have some more thoughts?
I just wanted, if I could, Kevin, just say one of the elements of the staff report really was meant, I didn't hammer on it, but the city dock has constantly evolved, and the views have constantly evolved. There is the most static I think the city dock has ever been is the last 50 years. And we have had incredible views because we have a parking lot. There, the obstructions are 6 feet high at the most. So the idea of having these trees, which is essential to the park, is important. It is a change, but what I was trying to recommend was that we minimize their effect on the view shed. That's it, just to minimize it, not to eliminate them.
Thanks, John. So just to kind of summarize where we're at, but we can continue the discussion. The trees will impact the view shed. And the view shed that I'm most concerned about, that I think Bill was mentioning, is the view shed from Main Street, being able to see from the top, the middle and the top of Main Street out to the water, and from the water to see St. Anne's and the steeple. And that was very clearly shown will be significantly obstructed, and that we have to temper that, got those important view sheds with the need for creating a park that people will want to be in, they will want to spend time in, and comfortably spend time viewing the water and enjoying the waterfront access that is only available in certain parts of the city. So that, to me, that's kind of the summarization of our situation of what we're looking at. That for the most part, it sounds like the commissioners are supportive of the trees because we understand the importance of viewing the water from a comfortable way, but the potential impact of the important view sheds is the concern that we are trying to mitigate. So Brendan, you raised your hand, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how we can turn this into a meaningful sort of, it sounds like we'd like for the team to come back to us with an option. I think right now we're discussing possibilities, but we don't know what they're going to look like. I think everybody agrees that it's not a reasonable option to strip all the trees out so we can restore it to the 1715 shoreline sightline that John drew in the staff report. I think we all agree that there have to be trees in the park, and a lot of them in order to avoid the heat island. Is there a way? So it sounds also like everybody is, and these were in the public comments as well. Everybody is a little bit concerned. I agree with Will. I would vote yes right now, but there is some concern about the view shed from the foot of Main Street and then slightly farther up Main Street. So is there a way to phrase a question that says our reservations are that we'd like to see an option that does X, and can we agree on what X is when we revert back with with a response? So is it that we would like another attempt to make it the view from the foot of Main Street slightly more open? What is our request?
That's a good question. So as John mentioned in the staff report, A1 is the guideline that we need to be reviewing, and that review mentions how the most prominent features of the design of the city are the State House and St. Anne's, and the direct connection of Main Street from St. Anne's to the water. So the water, the State House, and the Church Circle. So that's my challenge right now, is the views from the Church Circle directly to the water. So that's how I would phrase my concern. Bill, I think you were the one that was mentioning the Main Street concerns as well. So do you want to phrase it slightly differently, what your concern is?
I kind of want to jump to the other side for a minute. At the foot of Main Street for many years, there was a building basically right there where the new Donner Park was going to be. That blocked a big part of the view shed coming down and going back up. The shoreline that we keep talking about, the shoreline we have, as John clearly showed, is not the historic shoreline. It's been built out and out and out. I could see us accepting this with a caveat that the denseness of the trees or the planning needs to be reviewed further, in that so we can get a little more openness to what is currently proposed, so that there is opportunities for people to get a view from, say, the Market House or up on Main Street through that space. Right now, it appears we have a forested wall, and maybe I'm just reading it wrong, but I don't think anything we do tonight should slow this process down. The thing has to get done.
Thank you, Will. And then John, I wanted to Can you clarify for me what you mean by your proposal for axes of trees?
Well, I don't have, I can't put it up on the screen, but looking at the bird's eye view down on to the park plan, essentially there are two axes. There's one group of trees that is along the pedestrian walk at the waterfront, but set back from the waterfront, and then and that goes to Susan Campbell Park. It's not a perfectly straight line; it's a relatively straight line. And then
all the way from Randall Street, or are you saying from Craig
yeah,
Street?
well, on that side it does go. It starts at just down Dock Street, and with an interruption at the active park, and then moves forward more or less in slightly wiggly line, but generally straight toward Susan Campbell Park. And then the same is true on the other side, beginning at the Dock Street Park and going toward Susan Campbell Park. I am far less concerned with the view blocking of those trees as I am with the trees that are in the center of the park. That was it. It's those that are within the active park that I was most concerned with.
So you're not concerned with what I'll the larger trees along Eagle Alley,
well,
or the trees along Dock Street, the Winter area, but the active park area.
So it is, I think, very important to consider, and I think the applicant has made this argument before, and I think it's reasonable also that the interior of this space will be opened up.
Yeah, agreed.
And that is a bonus for everyone's view. So if you are standing at certain places within this park, you're going to have fantastic views looking from an elevated perspective, an elevated perch out to the water. But I think from Dock Street, looking through the active park, because you have trees on two levels, you may not be able to see through that. That's my concern.
Thank you, John. Eileen, I'll get to you in a second. Kim Golder, go ahead.
Take a swing at what Brendan just attempted, and that is, and I need, to hear from the applicants. I feel that we are repeating ourselves regarding a consistent theme. And the point would be now, is there, and hopefully this is why Eileen's hand is up, that is there a concession? I mean, because if we're going to keep talking about this over and over again, is there a concession that any adjustments, because what we last heard was, well, this is our recommendation, and we feel that this is what we need. Is there any middle ground we can find on the parcel of trees that John just stated? If there is any movement on that parcel, I feel that we could come to a, conclusion, or have enough of us be in agreement. I got Brendan's thumbs up already. Awesome. Appreciate that. But it appears, yep, I see Will. That's just where we are. So if we could just hear something that would seem that we are, willing to make some concessions, I think we'd be in a great place.
Thanks, Kim. Eileen, go ahead.
Well, absolutely. It's been a really thoughtful discussion that the commission has had, and John, with your comments as well. I'm going to ask Bryce to summarize from the architect's perspective, but in short, we certainly, and I've been communicating with James, our landscape architect, we certainly can work with the placement in the active park. The active park is the area that John Tower raised and that others have raised. We can absolutely work with that active park to locate those trees, to open up views. That is something that is not a challenge for us, and we can certainly achieve. And with that, I would like Bryce, if you have a couple comments, and James has a few views from the water, but I don't know that we need that because I think we can work with the direction we have from the commission. Bryce?
Yeah, well, just a couple of things. And, you know, sometimes as designers, we fault ourselves for maybe we haven't made a strong enough proposal or presentation to make this as compelling as we would like for it to be. But I think just a couple of things I want to point out. In the 1800s, when we had all the oyster packing houses there, obviously there was no view, and that there was a different world then. Through the years, since the parking lot has been there, since say at least the 70s, and those trees at the end of Susan Campbell Park have gotten quite large, you really can't see very well either with a lot of the cars that are there, not to mention the boats. And I think what happens is that you really don't even want to walk out to the end of Susan Campbell Park at the moment because it's not a pleasant walk. And that's obviously the things that we're trying to improve dramatically. So as John Tower said, there are going to be places here where you're going to have a really fantastic view that's going to be much broader and much more spectacular than it is today. The trees at the end of Susan Campbell Park will be gone. They've gotten quite large, actually, as we've shown in a few photographs. And we will have that whole interior section open for views. We do think it's important, though, to have trees maybe on 30-foot centers or so, or 25-foot centers, so that when they grow large, they are at a proper spacing that provides shading on the pedestrian walkways that get you out there towards the end of the dock and towards the end of Susan Campbell Park. So that's what I would like to leave you with. We can obviously look at increasing the spacing. We can make a suggestion on that, but I hope that to me, it's a pretty compelling design that we have framed this view with trees rather than putting the trees in front of the view. And it makes it a much more enjoyable view, an enjoyable walk to get out there. And that's what we're trying to achieve. And I think everybody wants the trees, obviously, for the heat island effect and for environmental reasons. So with that, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Bryce. Bill?
Yeah, question for you, Bryce. The large trees that you're talking about, relative to the height of the Dockmasters building, how tall are they when they're mature?
They're similar in height. I don't know if James, if we can even pull up any more photographs.
Images.
Yeah, they're similar.
Similar in height. The reason I say is because the current trees that are there are about the same height as the Dockmasters building.
Right. I would say
gives,
so.
gives me a
35
good
to 40
reference.
feet. Yeah.
They're probably just not as dense as the new ones, I assume.
Eventually.
I would say those trees are about as tall as the Harbor Master building. And James, any other thoughts you have on that? You've studied it more than me.
No, I agree. I mean, as much as we could, if there were specific views that we shared tonight that people wanted to comment on, I think that was the goal with providing the existing and proposed views, you know, because it's hard to speculate about what the view is going to be until you draw it, which is what we tried to do.
No, I've enjoyed your presentation and your documents. They're very clear.
All right, so I'm hearing from the commissioners that it sounds like there's likely a majority of commissioners that are comfortable with the trees because we understand the trade-off between certain view sheds and the desirability of the park and the clear public input for the shade, to be able to enjoy the park and take advantage of it rather than just have a grass field on a hot day in the summer that is not utilized. Do any of the commissioners want to deliberate any further? Do you have a proposal for a condition to specify other than John's concern about the lower, shorter trees in the active park area?
Kevin, this is Kim Finch. Can you
Yeah.
have John read out what his conditions are at this point that he's proposed to us?
For the trees?
For moving forward, I guess, with approval, you have conditions related to that.
I do. Would you like to hear all of them?
Yes.
Okay. HPC staff recommends conditional approval for the proposed project at City Dock, 144 Compromise Street, as partially consistent with guidelines A2 and A3, with requirements for future HPC applications to include the Maritime Welcome Center, the interactive fountain, the pergola, revisions to flood barriers, and all work associated with or in the vicinity of the Burtis House and the waterfront park of Prince George Street. Approval is also conditioned on an application for archaeology as required by state or federal agencies. Approval is conditioned on application for design of cultural interpretation and any sculptural elements. And finally, approved as consistent with guidelines C1 and other guidelines for outdoor furniture and furnishings. But I didn't, the trees, I didn't put in a condition.
You did in the body of the report, though. Can you go back up to the body? Within the body of the report, you
Yeah, I can
stipulated on
certainly
several
read that.
occasions, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, is there something else you might want to add at this point comes from somewhere else in the report?
It is, yeah. If you grab those out.
Yeah,
Well,
I think Kim's
oh yeah.
right.
No, I
You
did.
have some wording
I
in there.
definitely addressed it. So staff analysis. I'm not going to read about the beauty and the love for these historic dramatic views. But I did say staff has previously in site design review emphasized the necessity of maintaining the view to the water from a pedestrian perspective, and has previously recommended that potted trees within the center of the active park be moved to the perimeter of the active park. The same is true for the potted plants at the entrance to the Dock Street Park. Creating two axes of trees is strongly suggested for the park areas below Craig Street to maintain as much as possible views to the water. This is the single factor that could help balance the need for shade provided by trees and the pedestrian views to the water.
John, so is
Yeah.
there a reason you didn't include that as part of your conditions?
I thought, as with things like the fixtures and furnishings, I think it's very important for the commission to make a decision on it. But if you want me to condition it, I think it should be conditioned.
I think that is what I know I would like, and I interpret it as just a minor oversight, like a footnote. You had several of them, but that one just didn't carry down to the bottom. But I read it, reviewed it, and saw it as one of the conditions, although not listed at the end.
Certainly your recommendation.
Yeah,
I agree with Kim, and if I'm understanding what John, you said, and Kim, what you said, I think it would address what Brendan and I both are asking for, and hopefully the other commissioners. And I think Eileen has already agreed for the applicant that they would follow through on that.
Brendan, go ahead.
No, I think I'm asking basically the same thing that Will just clarified.
Yeah.
So if I'm understanding this,
I just want to. I just have a question. Are we right now signaling to the applicant we are okay with the trees as they are, or are we asking the applicant come back with an option? And what is that? What is the substance of that request?
yeah, that's what I was going to try to summarize to make sure we're all on the same page here. So John's suggestion in the report that he did not put at the end as a recommendation because he wanted the commissioners to decide this aspect, specifically around the trees in the active park area that potentially block a view shed from those in the coming towards the park from Randall Street. And if we could create some separation there, similar to the separation of having a line of trees along Eagle Alley and a line of trees along Dock Street, in order to have a corridor, a view corridor to the water. That's my understanding of the suggestion. That I actually am not convinced of that. I don't necessarily agree with it, with the active park area being an area where people are supposed to spend time. It needs to be shaded. And with the active park area being at about the 4-foot elevation and the base of the pergola stage being closer to the 8-foot elevation, I'm not sure how much view that you're really getting of the water when you're having to see over. Hill is probably a strong word, but that elevated green park area from the active park area. So I guess I don't agree with this particular condition around the trees in the active park area. So, but it sounds like I might get outvoted on that one.
Kevin, I think this is James Sink. I think your observation is correct about what the grade change would do from someone standing at the Dock Street parking lot at elevation 2. The base of the stage is at elevation 8, so that's a 6-foot grade change. Just grade, not no trees obstructing that view.
Exactly. Thank you, James, for that contribution. Eileen, do you have a comment on that? Or your hand was raised before I made my comment, so it might be a little.
I thought your comment was going to wrap up, so I will wait. Thank you.
Thank you. Will?
Given the nature of our current discussion, and in light of the hour, I'm just going to do what is often a procedural move just to see if we can push things along. I move that we recommend approval of the presentation, the application presented to us tonight with the conditions enumerated in the staff report.
So I do have a question on that statement about the conditions enumerated in the staff report. Are you saying all the conditions or just the conditions in the recommendation section?
In the recommendation section.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear on that.
Do you want to add anything in relationship to the trees?
I do not. That's the motion I'm making to see what my fellow commissioners think and whether they want to make a friendly amendment.
Well, I already stated my opinion on the.
Well, you need this. So a motion is on the floor and it needs a second for us to.
Right. If there's no second, then
it currently does not
along.
have a second. So if there is no second, that's where you would have to ask, is there a second? And if there is no second, then we're back to square one. And if there is, then we move forward to a vote. So.
Well, Kevin has to ask if there's a second. It's not.
I know he does. That's what I'm saying to him.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He needs to,
yes.
yes.
Misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just looking at my notes for a moment. Okay, I mean, if you've made the motion, so I'll ask for a second, and despite my reservations, yeah.
His motion actually is in support of what you're saying, actually.
I'll second it just to get it moving.
Thanks, Bill. Well, since it's been seconded, I'll take a vote. So all in favor of approving the flood resiliency plan at City Dock with the recommendations listed in the staff report, and just to repeat them to be clear, I'm going to read that recommendation again to be clear before the vote. HPC staff recommends conditional approval for the proposed project at City Dock 144 Compromise Street as partially consistent with guidelines A2 and A3, with requirements of future HPC applications to include the Maritime Welcome Center, the interactive fountain, the pergola, revisions to flood barriers, and all work associated with or in the vicinity of Berta's House in the waterfront park of Prince George. Approval is also conditioned on an application for archaeology as required by state and federal agencies. Approval is conditioned on an application for design of cultural interpretation and any sculptural elements. And finally, approved as consistent with guidelines C1 and the guidelines for outdoor fixtures and furnishings. Other approvals are conditional and require the submission of HPC applications. Eileen, do you, as the applicant, agree to those conditions?
We do.
Okay, so all in favor of that? Aye.
I'll go aye.
So I have 3 votes in favor, 4 votes Kim, Brendan, Kim Finch.
I'm okay.
Okay, so the vote is unanimous in favor to approve the application for the flood resiliency at City Dock. It's a very exciting milestone to pass for the city. It's a very important project, and we're very excited for the resiliency of the City Dock and the opportunity for the activation of the area. And we're appreciate the hard work that went into the design details and the many opportunities for public input, and we're glad that so many people were able to include their public input tonight, and I appreciate those who have stuck around listening to us, and we hope you feel heard, because this will be a great project for the city of Annapolis.
On behalf of the city, I want to thank the commission for tremendous public process, great comments, and for your support.
Thank you.
Same here. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. We have 2 administrative items on the docket on the agenda tonight. The second one, the discussion of the design manual. I'm confident my fellow commissioners were happy to defer that conversation after 10 p.m. Do my fellow commissioners want to go ahead with election of officers or defer that to April 9th meeting?
I'm happy to defer.
I'm happy to defer it also.
Okay, then we'll defer that to our next meeting on April 9th. So thank you for your support and input and commentary tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
With that, the meeting is
Move to adjourn.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Move to
Can I have a
adjourn.
second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay.
The meeting is adjourned.
Yeah. Thanks for